Hi-ho! Hi-ho!
Hey, we're Teachers Union. My name is Rose.
My name's Elizabeth.
My name's Madison.
And I'm Haley. And this is our lesson plan for the Capstone Learning Project. We're talking about folktales. It's aimed at 6th grade English students, loosely inspired by a lesson plan found on Alex by Cindy Swan. And yeah.
We will first be reviewing the overview of the genre for this lesson. Many of us remember watching Disney movies when we were young. Many of those were considered folktales. Folktales originally originated long ago and were spread by mouth. Storytelling is something that is very interesting and creative. That's where folktales came about. The stories tended to change as they were shared with more and more people. Most cultures from around the world have their own types of folk tales, and the folk tales reflect what the culture it came from and what feels to be important, considering their values. Since people are told folk tales from such a young age, this genre has a great influence over people, so it's important to study it. A few examples of some folk tales are things like Snow White, Johnny Appleseed, Tales of Mother Goose, Hercules, The Sword and the Stone, and the list can go on and on.
Following the discussion of the genre, we'll be talking about the different subtypes of folktales. And at this point, I think it's important to remind the students that these general subtypes are just categories that we created to describe something that can't truly be categorized, but we still separate them in order to help us understand them in a general sense. Some categories include legends, which have two main subtypes. The supernatural beings, such as elves or ghosts, are often in legends. And also historic and pseudo-historic characters are another type of legends. Another subtype are myths. They're commonly about sacred beings like gods and goddesses, but there's often overlap between legends and myths, so that can be a little confusing, but that's just the nature of literature. Another subtype is fairy tales. They're always fictional. They usually have a happy ending, and they're usually focused on morals. And the final subtype to be discussed are animal tales. They're stories about animals who act and behave like humans, often used to teach a moral. Directly following the discussion of subtypes, we'll be going over some general themes of the plots of the folktales. The themes of folktales are generally fairly universal. Most people find them relatable to some degree. Common themes include, but are not limited to, the struggle to be independent, the victory of good over evil, explanations for things of nature, and the importance of community and family.
The setting often takes place in the cultural area of the different folktales. So Europe would be medieval castles towering over villages. Africa would be vast jungles and large deserts. India/China would be colorful cities and grand palaces. And Native America would be teepees hidden by thick forests. The characters in folktales are usually flat, not round, meaning that they really don't have any depth to them. They don't.
Created using Powtoon.
Now that we have looked at some of the major characteristics of a folktale, let's look at a specific folktale. Created by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm in 1812, the tale of Little Snow White features many magical elements, such as an evil queen facing against an honorable hero and an underlying moral. The evil queen is jealous of Snow White's beauty and sets out to kill her. She hires the huntsman to kill Snow White, but he lets her live, and she moves in with 7 dwarfs. The queen is angered when she realizes that Snow White is still alive. She disguises herself as an old woman and attempts to poison Snow White through an apple. Snow White bites into the apple. She is successful, and Snow White is sent into a deep sleep that the dwarfs cannot wake her from. A prince traveling through the forest stumbles upon Snow White. The dwarves give him Snow White because he is immediately falling in love with her as she's lying in her coffin. As the prince's servants are moving her, they stumble upon roots. The movement causes the apple piece that was lodged in her throat to become loosened and awakens her. The prince confesses his love for her, and they begin to plan their wedding. The queen attends their wedding. As punishment for trying to murder Snow White, she is forced to wear shoes made of hot iron, and she is forced to dance until she dies. At this point, the teacher will point out the flat characters, the theme of the triumph of good over evil, and the castle setting. The teacher will also suggest that the story seems to say that love is necessary for a happy ending, and also seems to say that evil should be punished.
Once we have finished reviewing Snow White, the teacher will ask the students what stories have they read or watched with their families that could be considered folktales. Once a few examples have been determined, the teacher will ask the students what they think the theme of those stories are, particularly asking the students, what is the moral of the story? The teacher will provide some suggestions and steer the conversations towards thinking about how those themes impact us. If the students are not sure, the teacher will lead them by reminding them of general folktale themes such as independence, good versus evil, and family.
So we've created this video game on the smartboard to assess the students' comprehension, and it's about the different subtypes. So we have the different folktales, got Hercules, Sword and Stone, Cinderella, and the Tortoise and the Hare. And the different subtypes are fairy tales, animal tales, myths, and legends. So what they do is they pick up the picture. There's Hercules, he is a myth, and disappears. And Cinderella, we know she's a fairy tale, but let's see what happens when we put her in animal tales. She popped back into place. Okay, so we already said that Hercules was a myth, but what if we put Sword and Stone in a myth, even though he's a legend? It also works, because legends and myths are kind of really close to each other, and they're, like Haley said earlier, it's just a way that we classify them into different ways to understand them.
And also, all images belong to the Walt Disney World Company. Next, the teacher would assign groups. Each group of students must write their own folktales, choosing one of the subtypes and incorporating characteristics discussed in the lecture. This will allow the teacher to assess the students' ability to apply new knowledge and comprehension. The teacher will motivate the students by telling them that this is like an opportunity to create their own Disney movie. Students will be reminded that folktales contain things that people find important, so what the students find important should be in the tale. Potential examples: family, church, making good grades, friends, athleticism, and music. The teacher will be available during the writing process to answer questions.
As that class period ends, the teacher will remind the students of these folktales we have learned about play a role in helping us understand ourselves and our community. The teacher will ask them to think about in what ways their favorite stories have influenced who they are today. Class will follow up the next day with a library day. The groups will have time to finish their stories if necessary and create a slideshow presentation of their original folktales, explaining the literary events of folktales and the group's values that can be found in their tale. The presentations will be delivered in class on another day. Students will also turn in their original folktales on this day.
Hi-ho, 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 hi-ho.